Hey everybody, this is CJ. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Street Startups. I'm here as always with my partner, Tracey. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing just great, partner. Always glad to be back in the house again. Looking forward to another great episode with a superstar guest.
You got it. Oh my gosh. Listen, how cool is it when we get to have graduates from the course on Street Startups with us, right? It really I get thrilled. It's like you get to see the whole thing in action right here before our eyes, right? So listen, it's an honor to have Tanji here, but I'm gonna quiet down. You go ahead and introduce Tanji to our audience.
Oh, absolutely. So she's from my hometown, so it's a great honor to introduce Tanji Gilliam, owner of Retire, and to talk about her unique, very unique business venture that she's looking to go in. So this is one of our superstar pupils. So I'm just very excited to have her on board and looking forward to her sharing her story. And it's definitely an amazing story. So we are in for a special treat today.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much. Only you two can do an intro. Like, people really need to do an intro. Yes. I had this theory in grad school that, like, I don't know if you remember the hip hop group Double Trouble, that there's something like a double trouble aesthetic when if it's perfected in hip hop, it works, right? So think like Talib Kweli, Mos Def, right? Raekwon and Ghostface, right? Like, there's just pairs that kind of can set an intro up the right way and can rock a crowd. And I'm grateful to you both.
Well, we've been known to rock a crowd, so.
That's great. Well, thank you, Tanji. Listen, you earned your stripes in the workshop, right? And I think folks know that we had our first workshop back in the fall, and we ran it for 6 weeks. We had an incredible experience. We blew it out. We had 60 folks sign up to take the course. We only had space for 25, but we ended up taking everybody in. You graduated number one, right, out of the whole crew. So congratulations to you. We couldn't have a better person here representing cohort number one. Talk to us, Tanji. Just tell us your business, what your business was. You had such a great idea. Go ahead and share it with everybody.
So I appreciate that very much, and I appreciate most the opportunity, seriously and sincerely, that you gave me to refine it. The Retire plan was in development for about 5 years, and for some startups that sounds scary, but I'm an urban planner and I'm used to that kind of timeline, right? It's a big vision, right? And I love the encouragement of just kind of like, whatever your vision is, let's talk about how to scale it, right? It starts off with a tire recycling facility, and I guess that's the best piece of it to introduce tonight, right? Working with local micro businesses that are already in tire repair, tire collection as a result of it, right? To sustainably remediate those tires, right? So this is a huge problem in the New Jersey, area and the, tri-state area because of all the urban cities that we have. Trenton included, right? But everywhere from Chester up to the Bronx, all these little small locations where, the city government doesn't really have the capacity to adequately deal, right, with the volume of recycled tire product. And so there are plants all over this country, right, that are dealing with this in the private sector, but they've created this black hole area in the tri-state that doesn't quite want to handle with our stretch of 95, right? For better or for worse, it created a market opportunity for us to get into that opportunity, to get into that area and to begin to do the work that we need to repair our environment, to put Black and brown folks back to work, right? To create jobs in a severely distressed city in Trenton, New Jersey, and to bring industry back home to a town that is largely post-industrial, right? But still has second, third generation industrialists that could easily empower this project. So.
Excellent.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. Tanji, talk a little bit about, now you said it was a 5-year plan and something that you continue to work on. We live in that microwave age right now where folks can't work on a plan for 5 days,
yeah.
not alone 5 years. But as an urban planner, how do you, so you have to have that vision. I think that's where it comes down to, having a vision. That
Yeah.
vision that you have on this enterprise, talk a little bit about that, and how do you foresee that planning out?
Well, for one thing, my hat's off to those of us that can put businesses together, you know, as a quick startup, because I think that that takes a level of ingenuity, right? And then also a real command of opportunity that is also extremely admirable, right? But when I say that I'm an urban planner, all that means is that there's a heck of a lot of research and a lot of networking involved in putting together the kind of team that can ultimately redevelop a 40-acre campus, right? And so the larger the space, right, that you need for your site oftentimes means that you're going to have to go through rezoning, right? It means that you're going to have to engage your local politicians. It means that, you know, you want to be quiet enough in your planning where, God forbid, by the time that property goes up for auction, there's no other competitors, at least not ones that can beat you out, right? So there's a level of mystery that is required, I think, when you're doing city planning, because you're fighting for an allocation of space in a gentrification age, and you want to make sure that that property remains inside of a home team, right? And then other than that, I'll just say I was prepared for it, right? I'm an academic by training. There's a lot of research intensive work in the sustainable industry field because these are new industries, right? By and large part, even though tire recycling is 10, 15 years old, you know, we have a goal of utilizing that campus one day as an educational training ground that will continue to include, right, tire recycling and that sales, but it'll contain a lot of other kinds of new ideas, right, and new and innovation that, you know, is much needed to kind of continue the goals of what those sites are going to look like once we have the product and once we begin to, you know, develop with the product on the ground. So if you look at any major city development, right, so this is Trenton, think about Rush Crossing, right? Rush Crossing did not happen overnight. So even the federal government had to move slow enough, right, to get community input. A lot of people will say they didn't get enough community input, right? To knock down high-rise towers, to engage local contractors, right? To think about what that team should actually look like for me was invaluable, right? To have, you know, been on the tail end of that project and seen some of the mistakes that they made, right? But to have a model that said, okay, you know what, if you're going to redevelop that much space and you want to truly engage local contractors, you can't rush that. You can't rush that. So 5 years ago, I was at the end of Rush Crossing, and it taught me what it meant to kind of deal equitably and fairly within our same community.
Wow, it's a great lesson at Rush Crossing. Great
Yeah.
example. Great
Yeah.
DJ.
Tanji, one of the things you mentioned, so many different ways I could go with this, right? But let's keep moving in the direction you're bringing us. I love what you said about market opportunities, right? You were describing something that most people would look at and say, "Oh, this is a huge problem." Phrase you used was a market opportunity. Brilliant, love it, right? Total entrepreneurial mindset.
That's that reentry ventures refinement. You know, like you got to learn how to get to the punch, Dr. Gilliam.
Thank you. So the other part of this was you know, I love how you were an accomplished professional. You know, you've had many different successes in your career. And what I love is that you took those skills, you took those successes and brought them into the solution process here as you're developing your business. Now, what I want to ask you is, because of all those accomplishments and because of all those successes, you chose to go back to school, essentially, right? You chose to come back to this workshop. Tell us what that process was like for you, and why did you do it? And was it worth it?
I did it because my very first mentor ever in life was my elementary school librarian. My most recent mentors are CJ and Tracey, right? So it's like I'm 40 years old, but I think this is something that's often overlooked, especially by entrepreneurs, right? Because we're taught to kind of inhabit our ideas and make our way in the universe. But you can't do anything without proper mentorship, you know, and it took me reading Tracey's book, right, From the Block to the Boardroom, kind of getting a sense of what his relationship was like with John Harmon and thinking through like, what are the gaps this time, right? I'm always looking for good mentors, right? So my next planning project after Rush Crossing was the Universal Hip Hop Museum. Paradise Gray, founder of X-Clan, leader of the Stop the Violence movement, now part of Occupy the Hood in Pittsburgh. He's one of my more recent mentors, right? So that's, you know, like how you kind of benchmark it. You cannot do everything by yourself. And wisdom is really important, I think, especially to entrepreneurs of color, right? Because we've suffered so much disenfranchisement in our communities that if we don't tap into two things, one, the ancestors, and that sounds hokey to some folks, but it's real to me, right? And proper wisdom and guidance and mentors inside of our communities, doing the work on the ground before you so that you know how to not repeat mistakes. Right? Then you're like the blind leading the blind, right? And I don't mean to call our communities blind, but we're either going to get ahead of this development game or we're going to continue to suffer gentrification.
No, that's good stuff. That's good stuff. And you hit so many points on this, Tanji. Let me just home in on a couple of areas that you mentioned. And one of them was the networking opportunity, the mentorship. You know, we set up the online community on Reentry Ventures for that same opportunity. I recognize, as well as CJ recognized, for the decades long that we've been in business, a piece that we realize that networking, mentorship, opportunities, all those things come from the people that you're in contact with on a daily basis. And your circle is important. So you really hit on some great stuff. Let's talk a little bit about the ability to work with people like me and CJ, where you can just basically go online, you know, put in some questions, always have that person there that you can lean on to have that conversation, because we don't have that. And I think we need to really make sure that in our community that's accessible.
Right. It's an exercise in humility, right? Mm-hmm. That's the kind of commanding point from where I left off with the last question. And to talk specifically about Reentry Ventures, you know, I was just considering earlier today after a post actually that was made on social media by Wise Intelligent, right? Mm-hmm. That this tech game, that's the one that's stalling the revolution in ways that are making the revolution take a face and look back at itself and just kind of admit that it's aging, right? And I love revolutionary activist communities, don't get me wrong, right? I love them, right? But if you have a platform like Reentry Ventures, where you have a complete technologically advanced site, where you have not only Zoom calls, because everybody's got Zoom calls now, right? And everyone thinks that they do them well, even though we know that that's not always the case, right? But you have an entire server dedicated to your students, up and running. I taught at Penn last semester under the pandemic. Penn wasn't ready for the pandemic. Reentry Ventures was. Look, we have a manageable number of pupils. We're going to engage them all with this online content. We're going to record every single episode. We're going to have a dedicated server to deposit that much information to, right? 2 hours, right? And I've done some background in video, so you know I know. 2 hours of video content every night for 8 weeks, right? And so not every night, but once a week for 8 weeks, right? But every class is available by the next day. So you can go back and you can refresh. You don't have to sit there and take copious notes unless you really want to, right? You can kind of be alive in the space and then check in the very next day and say, what was that point that Tracey was making? Or what was that point how did I miss something there, right? And then of course, in addition to the recorded content, you have, you know, current news, right? That can kind of direct you and get you better in tune with what it is that you're trying to offer in the way of a service, right? You can look around the market and see what else is available and what you're missing, right? It's almost like a social media platform specific to Reentry Ventures in the way that, I mean, you know, without fail, and I'm not just saying this because I'm on your podcast, I swear, to anyone listening, that without fail can rival something in the business community, like, you know, I'm on Black Ivy, right? Like a Facebook group specifically tailored, right, to Black graduates of Ivy League universities and what your interests are and how we can develop your business. And so, you know, I can see that network growing, you know, well beyond you know, what the graduation rates for Blacks look like inside of Ivy League universities, right? And I think that that's what's especially nice about it. That it's more grassroots, right?
Yeah.
And it's not taking this niche community that already would have access to those kind of spaces in other areas, right? But instead it's saying, look, if we're going to deal, you know, equitably by our communities, then we have to bring everyone in, right? Everyone in that can engage the entrepreneurship mindset. And I think that you taught us best, really, Tracey, right? And from the box to the boardroom, that can include anyone. And it should include everyone in order to be equitable.
Absolutely. And we talk about that all the time, Tanji. You know, information is powerful. And how do we begin to bring the power of entrepreneurship and what that looks like to our community? Me and CJ had this conversation a couple of days ago. He ran some stats off to me that, you know, I kind of was taken aback about it, but it opened up my eyes to the work that we need to do. And first thing CJ said, we see it, and it's not going to stop us from doing what we need to do, but it's important that we know. So CJ, why don't you share a little bit of those stats with, because I think that goes right into the direction and to the heart of what we're talking about.
Yeah, Jill, and first off, Tanji, thank you so much. The information you gave and described about the value of the course, I think will be helpful for anyone who's making a decision whether or not this is for them, right? But the challenge is, you know, we're merging technology, and you hit it on this, Tanji. We're bringing technology into communities, and you know, the challenge is America might not be ready for this. There's 3 determining factors on whether or not folks are going to engage using tech tools like we did in the workshop. Now, first one is age. If you're young, nothing else matters. You're going to engage in this, right?
Right.
If you're not young, the second determining factor is, and when I say young, I mean in your 20s, right? Or younger. And the second most important factor is education. The higher you go up on the education ladder, then the more inclined you are to engage with technology as a learning tool. And then the final factor is income. The higher you go up on the income scale, the more likely you are to engage. So those are the big 3. And we're fighting that battle every single day to help folks who may not be showing up on those scales.
And that's, I mean, so true, right? The digital divide is still very real. And I don't want to make light of that, right? But that's where having a kind of abolitionist focus like you do, right? Working with folks that are formerly incarcerated, getting them to think about like how you re-enter into a space as opposed to how you kind of like consistently organize in a space. And I want to kind of tease out the difference between that, right? Because this is no disrespect to my activist community, right? It's just that's home too, you know, like tech is home and entrepreneurship is home, activism is home, but revolution is change, right? And I think that some of the people that will, surprisingly, if engaged properly and having, you know, specific mentorship that's sensitive to all of the different parameters that are required to re-enter citizens, right? But maybe that gap time and the need to kind of step back into a world, knowing that you've lost time and having a structured kind of plan for how you make up time and embrace the future, right? Present.
Yes. Tracey, what's your final thought for us?
Man, my final thought is that we got to get Tanji back on here.
I'm down. I'm game.
That's our final thought, CJ. Listen, we might need to recap this, Tanji, and bring you back on for a second time, because this was so much information, and I just love the way you combine that revolutionary mindset with that entrepreneurial spirit, because that what keeps us going.
So Tanji, thank you once again. We're going to get you back. Tracey, as always, thank you, partner. And folks, remember, the next workshop is starting on April 6th. You can check it out. If you want information, check out the application page at reentry-ventures.com. That's where you can get the information, or just hit us up on Facebook. You can find CJ and Tracey on Facebook anytime you want. Tanji, once again, thank you.
Thank you.
And folks, we will see you next time on Street Startups. Peace.